And we were standing on top of the ridge there on Piney Mountain, and all of a sudden you just can't see anything. It's just a wall of smoke. And the sound, I looked around thinking, what the heck? What is that? What is that sound? And one of the wildfire firefighters came up and said, that is the sound of fire.
This March, one of the largest mountain wildfires in South Carolina's recorded history erupted in the upstate, consuming nearly 16,000 acres and becoming the #1 priority fire in the entire United States for several days. It started with a couple careless hikers and grew into something no one expected. For those unfamiliar, Table Rock is one of South Carolina's most iconic landmarks. A massive granite dome in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It anchors Table Rock State Park, where thousands hike each year for the views. But it's also next to the Greenville watershed, which supplies drinking water to hundreds of thousands across the upstate.
Tonight, a state of emergency as wildfires rip through one of South Carolina's most popular state parks. Choppers dropping water at Table Rock State Park in the state's northwestern region. The flames already burning at least 1,000 acres and nowhere near contained.
Like many of you, I was glued to my phone watching this unfold on social media. Dramatic videos of massive planes swooping down through the smoke to dump water, firefighters working around the clock, and witnessing smoky skies that blanketed parts of the upstate. Day after day, the news kept reporting 0% contained, and I found myself wondering, how do you even fight a fire this big? So we started digging. And what we uncovered, let's just say I've been sharing wildfire facts with anyone who will listen. I apologize. Over the next 3 episodes, we'll take you inside the firefight to understand how wildfire response actually works in South Carolina and why Table Rock was such a challenge. We turned to Daryl Jones, the Forest Protection Chief for the South Carolina Forestry Commission. He oversees everything from fire suppression and law enforcement to aviation to emergency response. And what he told us completely changed how I think about wildfires in this state.
You know, we respond to fires year round in South Carolina. We have a fire season where it gets busier, but really it's a year round issue. And I think it's very transparent to most people because a lot of fires happen away from the road or away from developed areas. And we show up with a bulldozer and we put out the fire and nobody really knows about it, right? And everybody assumes that wildfire is like a Western problem. It happens in California and everywhere else, but it's not a problem here. But there are 2,000 to 3,000 fires in an average year in South Carolina that we respond to. And there's probably 7,000 to 8,000 that fire departments go to that they put out without needing us. So fires happen here all the time. We go help our friends out west when we're not busy and they come help us like they did last month here. We all train the same. So a firefighter in California takes the same basic training that our firefighters do. So we do that so that if I go to California, I know what my job is and who I work for and what the expectation is. And if they come here, I know they understand the same principles I do, right? So it's a cool system how we work nationally. And but a busy time, fire season, spring peak is, January 15th, maybe through the end of April. And usually in the summer, if you think about what happens, we get thunderstorms and a lot of rain, humidity's high, and there are not many fires. But then in the fall, sometimes the things dry out and you get dry frontal passages and all this other stuff. And so we can have busy fall fire seasons. 2 years ago, I believe, I looked at data for the previous 5 years, and there had been 11 days in the previous 5 years that we did not go to at least one wildfire in South Carolina.
Seriously, 2,000 to 3,000 wildfires a year? I had no clue. Before we get to Table Rock, let's talk about the 2 most important tools South Carolina uses to fight wildfires. Spoiler, they're probably not what you're thinking. The first, it comes from the sky. Here's Lee Berry, a pilot with the Forestry Commission.
My primary job is to fly and to find fire. And once I find it, report it. And then depending on what it is, either stay and help the suppression effort or to continue on in my search for more fire and allow our forestry commission dozers or the local fire departments to put the fire out. When there's a moderate fire risk, I'll have either myself or another pilot on patrol in the afternoon from generally about 1 o'clock in the afternoon until about 6 o'clock in the evening, going over the upstate looking for uncontrolled wildfire. And when it's a high risk, we'll have 2 aircraft. Now, what I've learned quickly is when we do the fire bans during the high risk time periods, pretty much any smoke means there's a problem. But so we immediately search out whatever's going on when we see that smoke plume coming up from the ground. But on a normal, not high risk, no fire ban, lots of people are burning, and they're doing it for constructive purposes or, getting rid of debris piles or control burns. So our job then becomes to determine what the level of risk of that operation is that we're seeing. If we felt like it might get out of control, we'll start communicating with our dispatch team. And often people have done what they're supposed to, but it's actually South Carolina law requires that you notify the forestry before you do an outside planned burn. So we have a app that shows those locations, and I'm looking at that before I go fly and taking, a screenshot or whatever, so that while I'm flying, I can tell if someone who is doing a debris pile burn has notified us.
So that's tool number 1, eyes in the sky. The second, it's not a hose. It's not even water. I'll be honest, I didn't even see this one coming either. Here's Daryl explaining what wildfire fighting really looks like in South Carolina.
What makes us different than the fire departments too is it's a different discipline of firefighting. We don't bring a shiny red fire truck on water. We rarely use water to fight wildfires. Mostly because where we work, there's not water nearby all the time, right? So our shiny red fire truck is a big yellow bulldozer. Our main way of fighting a fire, you didn't ask this, but you can put out a fire by taking away the oxygen and smothering it, right? You can cool it down with water, or you can take away the fuel. We tend to, in the wildland, we take out the fuel. I bring a bulldozer or 20 guys with rakes and shovels and Pulaskis and these hand tools, and we move everything that's not dirt out of the way, and the fire burns up to that fire break that we've created, and it stops spreading. That's really how we fight most of our fires. So our frontline dozers across the state, we have 160 that are positioned. There's some in every county. Some counties have more because of the fuels and the fire currents, right? We try to make data decisions, right? We got years and decades of fire data telling us where hotspots are, or where fuels are maybe going to make fires get bigger and we need more resources. So, all of our resources are assigned to a county or two, a sector, we call it, a couple of counties. But they're also state resources. They can go anywhere we need to. They may work most of the time in one county or 2 counties, but if we need them to go to the mountains or the coast, they're on deck to go. So we have 3 dispatch centers to help coordinate that. We've got 160 dozers. We've got our fire management officers, or our frontline supervisors, and our law enforcement officers. For the most part, they have a dual role because they supervise as bulldozer operators, the firefighters on the dozers, and they're the initial incident commander, right? They show up. They aren't on the dozer. They're in a truck with water, a wildland fire engine, and they tie in with the fire department and decide how to put out the fire and coordinate different resources and talk to the aircraft and all that stuff.
Now let me set the scene, because this story doesn't start on the mountaintop. It actually begins weeks earlier on March 1st. Let's let Daryl explain.
March 1st was a just absolute wide open day for South Carolina. Within about 2 hours statewide, we had 104 wildfires start. Most fires don't happen first thing in the morning because it's humid, and at night the humidity goes up, wind dies down, and then around 10 o'clock or sometime in the morning, the sun comes up, it gets hotter and humidity gets less, and the wind comes up, right? So we usually see fire activity peak in the afternoon because that's the driest time of day, hottest, warmest, driest part of the day. So that afternoon, March 1st, we had fires all over the state. And so we had the Covington Drive fire, which ended up being over 2,000 acres, is still burning today at Myrtle Beach. We had a fire on Pawleys Island, threatened a bunch of homes there. We had 100 smaller fires across the state. So we were busy from March 1st, continually. And other states around us, North Carolina and Tennessee and Alabama and North Georgia, we're all seeing other fires up in the mountains, fires in the mountains are different. Bulldozers don't do as good, or it's harder for bulldozers to do some things on terrain than it is on flat ground, right? So we knew the mountains were dry. We had this sort of ongoing building drought. So the fuels were getting drier every day, right? It was kind of warm and sunny, and wind was taking away moisture. You could kind of, if you understand the process, you could see it building and getting worse, right? More potential for fires. We knew before the fire happened at Table Rock, we got some fire intelligence basically from fire fuels people that, hey, fuel moisture for those hardwood leaves in the mountains are as low as we've ever recorded.
So the conditions were primed, dry air, fallen timber. One careless spark was all it would take. The first reports of the Table Rock fire came on March 21st during a search for a missing hiker. Pickens County deputies and their K-9 units were working their way through the rugged terrain of Table Rock State Park when they ran into something far more urgent, a wildfire climbing fast near the summit. According to Sheriff Tommy Blankenship, the deputies barely made it out in time. What made it worse? The fire was human-caused, linked to teenage hikers on the trail earlier that day. But it wasn't just bad timing. The fire didn't come out of nowhere. Conditions had been building, quietly, dangerously, for weeks.
On March 21st, we had a report of a wildfire on the top of Table Rock Mountain, right on the top of the mountain. Our guys immediately up there, the local firefighters said this is a bad spot because we've had fires before. The Pinnacle Mountain Fire in 2016 burned in Table Rock State Park. So this is that same piece of ground that we knew was difficult to access. We knew there were challenges, right? The fire burned in 2016, so we knew there would be trees already up there that were dead from 2016. We knew Hurricane Helene had happened a few months before, and a lot of trees were on the ground. So we knew it was huge potential. We knew other states were having bad fires that were challenged in their control. So when this fire started, you're sitting at the bottom of the mountain as our local firefighters say, man, we got to climb to the top of that and try and reach it with hand tools and stop it. And we know it's going to be aggressive. We know it's dry. We know it's in a challenging place. There's safety concerns with slope and falling off the mountain and rocks and dead tree. It's just not a safe business in some ways, right? So they called me and said, hey, can we get some aircraft to help try and keep this fire small? And immediately we launched the two contract small single engine air tankers that we have. They got up there and did some work, and it got dark. They weren't able to do a whole lot because of the time of day. We didn't discover this fire or get notified about this fire till sometime close to 6 p.m.
Now, Daryl said this so casually, but what he just described is actually pretty big deal. Having those planes ready to go immediately, that's something South Carolina hasn't been able to do in decades.
In my position, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what we need as an agency and giving us the right tools to do the job, right? And one thing we had worked for a couple of years is getting a contract for small, they're called single engine air tankers that would work for us. They'd be here for a certain time of year and be available to use on any fire I need them in the state. It had been the last time we had contract resources that were under our control was 1994 after Hurricane Hugo. So we have 10 airplanes that we operate. They're ours, but they're technically on loan to us from the U.S. Forest Service. But they can't drop water. They've got a pilot, and they can help us find the fire or watch out for safety concerns and those kind of things. But these aircraft came on contract February 14th on Valentine's Day. That was 2 or 3 year process to get that contract in place, and bring them on when it was the right time of year, when we felt like we could use them, and they would help provide more safety for my firefighters. Or the idea really was to have a couple of aircraft sitting here that I could call anytime I want and get them to a small fire and keep it from becoming a big fire. That's the whole goal.
So for the first time in nearly 3 decades, South Carolina had aircraft that could respond within hours and not days. But there was one problem no one could solve on that first day: darkness.
So looking up at the fire umbrella on the top of Table Rock, and you see it starting to get hotter, and the planes come and do a little bit, but they can't fly at night. There's some safety concerns. So we started asking for more stuff and, trying to build an organization we knew the potential was there, and said, we need to bring a lot of stuff to try and stop this fire. So that's kind of how it progressed from finding it, looking at it, starting to hike up to it, calling for aircraft. And we sent the first aircraft, and they had to come home, and then they went back the next day.
So there you have it. 6 p.m., a fire on top of a mountain in the worst possible spot with no daylight left for aircraft. By nightfall, it had burned about 10 acres. That may not sound like much, but with dry conditions, hurricane debris, and near vertical terrain, everyone knew it was just the beginning. The state immediately issued a burn ban that night. The governor was briefed, and the mountain kept burning. That's where we'll leave episode 1. But what happens next? How does a 10-acre fire become a number 1 priority fire in the country? What sparks a second blaze miles away? And how do you fight flames moving faster than you can contain them? In our next episode, we'll take you inside the most intense week of firefighting South Carolina has ever seen. Special thanks to Daryl Jones and Lee Berry from the South Carolina Forestry Commission, and to Max Stone from Natureland Trust. We'll be hearing a little bit more from him on upcoming episodes. If you're enjoying The Outfall, follow, share, send it to a friend. It makes a bigger difference than you'd think. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. This is Robert.